Ladies and gentlemen, this is Frank Chase Jr. back with you to talk to you, just to have a tithing conversation with you today. I want to just address some of the tithing things that I have been hearing over the last time I recorded a video. So I just want to give you a little bit of information about what I've been hearing and just to have a general tithing conversation with you today. And I know many of you have watched my videos over the period of time. I'm not going to do any expanded video on this one. It's just going to be some things I want to say about tithing and what it is not. So one of the things that's been puzzling me over the last, maybe the last couple of weeks is this notion that people cannot get out of their head that the tithe is not a 10% of your income. There is a real disconnect between what the word is and what the practice is. And so everybody conflates the word tithe with money. Now, money is money. Tithe is not money. Tithe is crops and cattle, as I have been saying over and over again. But when you are heavily indoctrinated to falsehood, it is very hard to change people's minds about something, because once you discover that you have been deceived for 30 or 40 years about a biblical subject, it can cause cognitive dissonance in a person's theology and their belief system. And so a lot of people can't let go of the tithe argument, the monetary tithe argument, that it is required, because it would disrupt their their church life to some degree. And yes, it will. It disrupted my church life. In fact, I had to leave. And so you have to make a decision based on facts, not based on falsehood, not based on innuendo. And when you study the facts of the Bible about tithing and what it really is, then you have to make a theological decision. And not everybody is willing to take a theological and make a theological decision about something in the Bible, because you are emotionally tied to a place. You don't want to experience rejection. You don't want people to look at you funny, and you just want people to like you. That's basically, you want people to like you. And so if you take a different position on a biblical subject, you risk people not liking you, people not respecting you, people calling you crazy, which I have been called a few times. But that's to the point. That's not even the point of this conversation at this point. But what really bothers me is that every time I hear somebody say this, I got to answer the question now. They keep saying, tell me somewhere in the New Testament where God said you didn't have to tithe. That is the argument. That is the defense that people make about tithing. That's the defense they make. Tell me something in the Bible, in the New Testament, where Jesus or God said I did not have to tithe. So you think about it for a little bit, and you go back and forth in your mind and say, how do I answer that question? Now, I know many of you out there could probably answer that question yourself because you studied the subject. But when most people are hit with that question, they really can't answer it because they've never have studied the subject of tithing of any length or to degree. So I'm going to answer it in the most simplest terms that I can. The reason why the New Testament does not say you should not tithe is because under the New Testament in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the audience at that time understood what the tithe was. They understood that the food and crop tithe was still required in the New Testament because the temple still stood. So there would be no need for the Messiah or for the apostles to address the subject, because everybody in the audience, in the first century audience, in the first century church, understood what the tithe already was. They knew it was crops and cattle. So yes, that's why the New Testament does not say that you should not tithe. And yet again, let me say another point about this. If you look at Matthew 23 and 23, it identifies what they were tithing. And in Matthew 23:23, it is clear Jesus was, or the Messiah was, rebuking the Pharisees. He says you tithe rent, new, and coming. Those were spices. So we know just by that verse, by hermeneutics and exegesis, that the tithe in the New Testament were edible items. It was not cash. It was not 10% of your income. So that's why you don't have a direct rebuke of anybody shouldn't pay tithes in cash, because that didn't exist in the first century. So when someone hits you with that question, you should answer them that way. Now, I'm going to address some statistics today, and I hate statistics myself, but I read an article about 21 fascinating facts about tithing. Now, this article is written with the background that you should tithe, but I'm going to dispute some of these 21 facts that I found online about tithing. And yet, before I get to that, let me do something else first, by the way. So bear with me a little bit, ladies and gentlemen. You know, there are times when I think that my position on tithing and the book I wrote about tithing, a kleptomaniac who's really robbing God anyway, sometimes I get to the position and get to the thinking that my efforts are not really well worth it, because the pushback that I get is pretty relentless when people just want to hold to a position that they've never studied. They will fight you tooth and nail. And they have never picked up their Bibles to study the word tithe to find out what its true meaning is, but will fight you tooth and nail down to everything they have within them to defend this doctrine that is not contained on the pages of the Bible. That is amazing. That is truly amazing, ladies and gentlemen. I find it awfully amazing. Here's what I also find amazing. Sometimes you run into an article, ladies and gentlemen, that just gives you another push. You said you got to keep on fighting. Well, I ran into another article, by the way. An article where a North Carolina church, in an effort to keep the tithing money coming in, had the members of the church in North Carolina commit unemployment fraud. Now, how desperate do you have to get to commit fraud to keep tithe money coming in? Now, I'm going to read an excerpt from the article. You can find it online, or you can find it on Facebook by typing in unemployment fraud. An evangelical church already under investigation for luring foreign believers to the U.S., where they were kept as victual slaves. This is shocking. Has been accused of encouraging parishioners to file fraudulent unemployment claims so they could keep the tithing coming in. Have you ever heard of such a thing? Now, I'm skipping down. In an interview, contractor Randy Fields, apparently he went to this church, related how he appealed to church founder Jane Watley to allow him to scale back his tithing because his business was faltering, only to have the religious leader encourage him to file fraudulent unemployment claims in the name of his employees. Can you believe this, ladies and gentlemen? Someone would ask someone to commit fraud so they can keep the tithe money coming in. I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, this tithe doctrine is so cruel and unusual. It will cause you to go bankrupt. It will rob you. So when someone says that if you're not paying tithes, you're robbing God of tithes and offerings, turn that around. You're being robbed by the church who teaches such things. Now, according to this report, Fields was not alone, with multiple other church members and fellowship employees, also admitting they committed fraud in the name of the church. The report goes on to note that the allegations are being investigated by the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Now, this is how you know things are going really bad. Let me continue. Detailing years of fraud, former church adherents, it estimated that the fake claims, including some filed by the business owners' wives and other family members, would have diverted hundreds of thousands of tax dollars to the church over a 6-year period. This church is in North Carolina, ladies and gentlemen. It is called the Word of Faith Fellowship. Now, after reading that article, I have to keep on pressing on, defending the fact that the tithe is not money, it is crops and cattle. So let me get back to some of these statistics that I was talking about earlier. Now, if you want to identify what the tithe is, go to Leviticus 27 30 through 33, and you will not find the word money mentioned as a tithe. Now, these 21 tithe statistics are basically trying to convince you to cough up your money, to make you feel guilty, to put pressure on you. And there should be no giving. No giving that you ever do should be under pressure or under compulsion. It should always be from the heart. And if you're not giving from the heart, you might as well keep it in your pocket. Now, the first stat says only 3 to 5% of Americans who give to the local church do so through regular tithing. Now, I want to address this percentage. The Barna Research Group has made a statement that this 3 to 5 single-digit tithing percentage has remained this way for decades. And why does this percentage remain so low? Why does 3 to 5% of the people tithe monetarily? Well, the other percentage, the rest who don't, they're not convinced that the doctrine works. And from my research, it has always been in single digits like this because no one really accepts the fact that tithing is really a biblical doctrine. And that's why the numbers have remained so low. And they will continue to remain low over the centuries and have remained low over the centuries because there is no scripture in the Bible that can prove that you must pay God a monetary 10% of your income as a tithe. The word tithe does not associate with money. It has everything to do with what you put in your mouth. Food, crops and cattle, grain. That's what tithe is. Here's another statistic, ladies and gentlemen. In 2000, American evangelicals collectively made $2.66 trillion in income. I'm assuming this stat is to try to make you feel guilty that so many people who go to church make so much money, they're being stingy and they won't even give up part of this $2.66 trillion. Well, they're not. And they're not going to, and they don't have to because the tithe is not money. If a person wants to support their church with tax deductible giving, well, you can give any amount of money you so choose based on your budget and based on the IRS code when you file your taxes. So don't let nobody fool you. You do not have to pay the tithe. Number 3, total Christian income in the United States is $5.2 trillion annually, nearly half of the world's income. Well. There you go with the guilt tactic. It doesn't matter how much money people make. That's not the key issue. That's not the biblical question here. The biblical question is, how much does God want out of your paycheck every week or every 2 weeks or every month? Not a single dime other than what you give from your heart. Okay, let's look at another one. 1 trillion to 3 trillion in wealth will change hands every year with the Christian community. There you go with another guilt tactic to make you feel like Christians are stingy and don't have any reason to want to give. But none of these statistics are associated with the Bible. These are just statistics, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, let's look at something else. For Christian families making less than $20,000 per year, 8% of them give at least 10% in tithing or more. the figure drops to just 1% over a period of time. Well, here we go again. Why is the number dropping? Why is the number dropping to a low percent and remaining in single digits? One of the reasons is because of my book and many other books that's being published about tithing. Many people are discovering the truth and they're now giving from the heart. And this is causing the drop in some of the numbers. And so I want to try to get you to understand that this is what's causing the drop in numbers. The more people discover what tithing really is, the less the money is going to go into the church, and people are going to start giving from their heart or giving where God tells them to give. And so even though the books that have been published about tithing that are against tithing, we have not made a big inroads into this false doctrine because it still has many strongholds on many people's minds. Many people think they're going to go to hell if they don't tithe. God's going to curse them if they don't tithe. They don't read the Galatians where nobody is cursed for not tithing, and we're not cursed at all. They go by Malachi 3, 8 through 10, where God going to rain down blessings on you if you tithe and all of this stuff, and don't even understand that Malachi is not talking about money. It's talking about rain, physical rain, not physical dollars coming from heaven. So it gets pretty mad and pretty crazy when you start understanding that there is no way in the world that you're going to pay 10% of your income and God's going to bless you with millions and millions of dollars. It just doesn't work. People have been tithing for decades and years, paying 10% of their income. And a lot of them have been poor people or people with not enough money to pay their bills. And yet the financial boat has not arrived. And they're wondering why. And the answer is, it is total misinterpretation of the scripture. Okay, let's look at this. The average donations by adults who attend U.S. Protestant churches is about $17 a week. Yeah, that's a general figure, about $17 a week, and that may be right and that may not. But when you pressure people to give or pay 10% of their income, you're going to end up getting about $17 a week, because most people are going to feel like, well, I paid my 10%. I don't have to do nothing else. That was a lot of money out of my paycheck. And so the $17 a week is about right, I guess, or could be a little less, a little more as you go and study this. But again, when I discovered tithing, I had to change my whole financial situation around. I had to start recovering from debt. I had to start recovering from other things because, ladies and gentlemen, whether you believe it or not, in some people's cases, tithing has sent people into bankruptcy. Tithing has caused people to go get their houses repossessed and foreclosed on. It is madness. It is utter madness. Okay, let's keep on going. 77% of those who tithe give 11 to 20% or more of their income, far more than the baseline. 77%. So this one is such that only a small percentage of the people in church give the most money, and the rest do not. That has been a standard case forever, ladies and gentlemen. Standard case forever. A lot of people, that happens in a lot of churches. But as more and more people catch on to the fact and start studying and reading books about tithing, then they're going to discover what the tithing really is. And then they're going to start seeing a difference. And we're going to start finding out the true people who were called to the ministry. Because a lot of people are called to the ministry to collect tithing money. That's what they want. And true people who are called to ministry, and I'm not talking about full-time ministry. I'm talking about you called to the ministry, but you still keeping your job, because that's the New Testament way. That's the New Testament way. And I have a whole section on my book about that, full-time ministry and part-time ministry, in my book, Kleptomaniac, Who's Really Robbing God Anyway. So to drive home the point about what tithing really is, I'm going to share with you some few things here. We know that the Bible teaches that there are 4 different types of tithing in the Bible. 4 different types. The only type you hear is a monetary tithe, which is not in the Bible. So let's X that out. There is no monetary tithe in the Bible. There is no 10% of your income in the Bible. You won't find anyone in the Bible giving 10% of gold or silver to the temple or to the priests or to the Levites. It's not there. You won't find it. And I've already explained why you don't have no direct commandment in the New Testament that you do not have to pay tithes. Well, we already talked about that. Why there is no direct commandment. And do not conflate money with tithe. They are 2 separate entities. Okay. When someone tells you that you are cursed for not tithing, Galatians 3:13 tells you you're not. So go to Galatians 3:13. When someone tells you are cursed with a curse, you go to Galatians 3:13 and it will tell you you are not cursed. And here's what it says. Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. So there you have it. As soon as they say that, as soon as somebody or a church or a pastor tells you curse with a curse for tithing, you need to turn around and walk out the door. Now, what are the 4 types of tithing? You had the Levitical tithe. Then you had the festival tithe. Then you had the poor tithe. Then you had the priest tithe. That was the tithe of the tithe that the Levites gave to the priests, which was not a tenth, but was 1%, because a tenth of a tenth is 1. The Levitical tithe was the tithe that was given to the Levites by the other 11 tribes of Israel who were crop growers and farmers. Farmers and herders paid the tithe to the Levites. And ladies and gentlemen, have you ever studied your Bible to the point where you did not know this? But not one female or no woman in the Bible ever paid a tithe. No women or children paid tithes in the Bible. So we got churches making children, teenagers pay tithes, and that was not even in the Bible. So where's this madness coming from? It is a money grab system, ladies and gentlemen. It is a fundraising system, and whatever you can invent as a fundraising system to support the institutional church, that is the kind of stuff that will be implemented outside of the Bible. Now, poor people in the Bible didn't pay tithe. That's why you had a poor tithe. That poor tithe was for poor people. It was for the Levites. It was for the widows and the orphans and the hungry. So there was a poor tithe. There was the festival tithe. There were 3 festivals in Israel. And during those 3 festivals during a year, a tithe was given during the 3 festivals, ladies and gentlemen. Then you had the Levitical tithe. Now, I'm doing this in this way because you can read the whole book and it's broken down piece by piece. And then you had the priest who got a tithe. And in the Bible, the priest got other forms of support. And that's in my book also. Now, let's look at some more of this stuff here. Let's look at some more of this stuff. In the Old Testament, if you did not tithe the crops and cattle, you were cursed with a curse. In the New Testament, you are giving by grace. That is the simple answer, ladies and gentlemen. Giving by grace. Okay. When did the tithe get annulled? When was the tithe annulled? Well, I talk about this in my book about when the tithe was annulled. Okay. And if you look at the tithes, you look at Romans 10:4 and Hebrews 8:13, that will tell you when the tithe was annulled. And Hebrews really explains it. And it really explains it. Now, I'm going to try to explain it again because every time I try not to explain this, people get confused. The tithe was affirmed dead and gone in 70 AD. What happened in 70 AD? 70 AD is when the temple, the Israelite temple, was destroyed. When the temple was destroyed, when the Levites were dispersed and the temple was destroyed, effectively the tithe ended. And it also ended at the cross. When the Messiah gave his life, effectively the tithe ended. And you can look at Romans 10:4, Hebrews 9:16-17, Luke 23:33 through 46. And so now all giving is based on pure generosity. And you give as you prosper, irregardless of percentage. It has to be from your heart. So whatever you decide to give from your heart, that's what you give. There is no such thing as a percentage tithe. And again, the tithe and money are two separate things. Do not conflate them as the same thing. Oh, and by the way, a lot of people often like to talk about the first fruits. Well, I'm going to blow that one up here in a minute. The first fruits. And I wish I had a good picture that I could show you. In fact, I'm going to show you here in a minute what first fruits really are. So hold on there, because I'm trying to get this right. I'm going to show you what exactly first fruits is. First fruits. Okay, let me give you this. I'm going to put this up toward the screen. Someone says that you're supposed to pay your first fruits. Well, your first fruits is this, ladies and gentlemen. You see this picture? These are first fruits. You got your grapes, you got your grain, you got your crops. Those are first fruits. First fruits are exactly what the Bible says. They are the first things that come out of the ground. They are the first things that come out of the ground. So I'm going to stop here because I just wanted to share that with you. I just wanted to give you a little bit of things about the tithe and just let you know that you're not obligated to pay 10% of your income. And if you really are searching for the truth, study the scriptures to make yourself approved of God. A workman need not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Study the scriptures. Search them daily, in and out, because a true believer will search the scriptures daily to see if those things be so. So if people are making these claims to you and telling you have to pay money as a tithe, and there's no evidence in the Bible that you have to, then why are you doing it? Are you trying to follow the crowd? Or be like the Joneses? Or do you want to know the truth so you can be financially set free? Well, ladies and gentlemen, you can check out my tithing blog at tithenomore.com, and you can find a host of information about the tithe that I have put together over the last year or so. Many articles I wrote on my blog, some videos, some information. I do a lot of Jewish history on it and explanation. You'll find a host of things. And I'm not the only one who's writing books about this subject. You can find other books on this subject. But I want to tell you for sure, there is no such thing as a tithe of your cash from your paycheck. So when you walk into a church and they start waving those tithe envelopes, just put some money in the plate. And that's it. If you choose to write it on the envelope and get you a tax statement from your church, that's up to you. That's your personal financial decision. If you choose to put the money in and don't get no statement, that's up to you too. But because the IRS allows for deduction for charitable giving, you can choose to take that up or you can choose to refuse it. It's up to you. But when someone says you are cursed and you have to do it and you feel guilty, keep your money in your pocket. So I'm going to stop here, ladies and gentlemen, and I will try to come back to you and share just off the cuff again some other time. But for right now, we're going to say, have a good day, and we'll talk to you later.